What happens when a trade agreement becomes a countdown? Why would a single date suddenly matter for prices, jobs, and investment decisions across two continents? And why are businesses and policymakers now watching the calendar as closely as they watch the headlines? In the last hours, a new message from the White House has pushed EU-US trade talks back into the spotlight. Not with a technical update, not with a quiet meeting, but with a clear deadline, July 4th. So, what exactly is behind this date? What is already agreed, what is still not approved, and why does the process appear stuck? And most importantly, what could change for consumers and companies if tariffs rise again? This story matters because it is not only about politics. It reaches into factories, shipping routes, retail prices, and future investment plans. It also matters because the EU and the US are each other's most important partners in many sectors. When their trade relationship becomes uncertain, the ripple effects can reach far beyond Europe and America. Today, we will break down the key points in a clear, neutral way. What the deadline is, what the tariff numbers mean in practice, why the European side has not completed the approval process, how Washington is framing the delay, and what realistic options exist between now and July 4th. Here is what is known so far. Donald Trump said the European Union must approve last year's trade framework by July 4th, or face higher tariff rates on EU goods. He described this as a deadline extension, after earlier signals that tariffs on EU autos could rise quickly. He also referred to a recent call with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and suggested he agreed to give more time. This is where the story becomes interesting because there is already a framework that was discussed last year. But the final implementation steps are still not fully locked in on the European side. To understand the tension, you need to separate three layers. Layer 1 is the political message from Washington. Layer 2 is the European approval process, which includes more than one institution. Layer 3 is the real-world impact, which depends on what tariff rate actually applies and to which products. Let us start with the numbers, in simple terms. Reporting describes a framework where many EU goods would face a tariff level around 15% under agreed terms. But after a U.S. legal decision earlier this year, the tariff setup became more temporary and less predictable, with a 10% tariff used while the administration reviews trade issues and looks for a new legal basis. The latest White House message suggests tariffs could rise to higher levels if the EU does not approve the framework by July 4th. Now, the key question: higher tariffs on what exactly? Some reporting notes uncertainty on whether higher rates would apply broadly or focus mainly on autos. That uncertainty matters because autos have long supply chains, complex part sourcing, and major employment across Europe. Even a limited increase in auto-related tariffs can create higher costs that move through dealerships, transport firms, and component suppliers. Why is the European side not finished with approval? Because the EU approval process involves both political negotiation and legal safeguards. The European Parliament has raised concerns and has sought additional protections before the agreement becomes fully operational, while discussions with member states continue. In practice, that means the EU is not one single signature. It is a process where different institutions align, and that takes time. From Washington's point of view, the delay is framed as the EU not delivering its side fast enough. From Brussels' point of view, the process is framed as standard democratic oversight, designed to ensure the deal is stable and enforceable. These two narratives create friction, even if both sides say they prefer a deal over a prolonged tariff dispute. So why pick July 4th? The date is symbolically important in the United States. It is also close enough to create pressure, but far enough to allow negotiations and internal EU coordination to continue. Now, let us talk about what this means for the global economy. In practical terms, tariffs function like a tax on imported goods. Companies can absorb that cost, which reduces profit and can lead to delayed investment. Or they can pass it on, which can push prices higher for consumers. Or they can redesign supply chains, which is expensive and slow. In the EU-US context, supply chains are deeply connected. A car assembled in Europe can contain components sourced from the US and other regions. A machine tool shipped to the US can include parts from multiple EU countries. A tariff increase, therefore, does not only affect one side. It changes planning on both sides because companies build supply chains around predictability. Another important element is business confidence. Even if tariffs do not rise on July 4th, uncertainty before the deadline can already change plans.